Hey y'all, today we're going to answer the very common question about how to recover your core postpartum or after delivering your baby. But first, before we jump into it, I just want you to know that if you look into the description, you'll see a link there to my ConqHER Core Foundations program waitlist. It hasn't launched yet. We are in the middle of developing it, but a lot of what we're going to talk about in this video, we go into way more detail about that in the ConqHER Core Foundations workout program. It is really geared towards helping you build back that foundational strength postpartum before you go back to all of the workouts and activities that you love and how to do it in a really safe way. So check that out if that is something that interests you or if you want to know more about recovering your core postpartum. But now let's jump into it. Okay, before we can talk about how to recover your core postpartum, I really think it's important for us to know why your core needs recovery postpartum, because I think a lot of women will think that maybe they're the exception to that, or that they feel pretty good and they feel strong still postpartum, so they don't think that their core needs that recovery stage postpartum. But during pregnancy, those abdominal muscles in that abdominal wall are getting really stretched out. And as they get stretched out, it gets really hard for our brain to access them, because as a muscle gets stretched out, it also gets very thin. And the thinner the muscle, the less automatic it feels for the brain to jump to and utilize that muscle. So especially depending on how well you were using those core muscles pre-pregnancy, how soon those muscles got stretched to the point that it was harder for the brain to use and control your core muscles. Depending on all of that is how much recovery we really need to do to retrain the muscles to automatically use the core correctly again. Another big reason is because we all get ab separation during pregnancy. We know from studies, it's estimated that 100% of women by the end of their pregnancy are going to have a separation in the abdominal wall. That is meant to happen. We are set up with an anatomy that allows our abdominal wall and our ab muscles to separate to make room for baby as baby grows, and that's a good thing. We also get a rib cage that tends to spread and get a rib flare as baby makes room in that abdominal cavity and moves things out of the way as however he or she needs, which causes those ribs to flare and get out of baby's way. And that flare in the ribs can also really add strain and stretch to the abdominal wall. So afterwards, a big goal aesthetically of core recovery, not even just functionally using your core well, but aesthetically, we want those ab muscles to recover in a way that looks the way that we want, where we don't always have that big gap in our abdominal wall that can cause a lot of problems with things like pressure management or your core's ability to support you and support your spine. So that's another big cause of it's kind of out of our control to an extent. There's some stuff we can do about that during pregnancy, which that's a whole other video, a whole other topic, but some of it is very far out of our control. And so then we all go through it in pregnancy, and it's all reasons that those muscles need recovery postpartum. Okay, so now let's talk about what core recovery postpartum actually means, because I think that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. But as a pelvic floor physical therapist and someone who focuses on helping women stay active and strong and comfortable through pregnancy and postpartum, what core recovery really means to me is getting back to a point where you use your core muscles in the appropriate way, not in a way that's compensating for a lack of core strength or core control, but getting back to it, and very automatically, meaning just like it was before your pregnancy, before you had a baby, you really never had to think about how you were using your core. For the most part, for most of us, it's happening automatically in the background while we do our activities, while we do our exercises, right? And so true core recovery to me means getting back to a place where all of that is happening in a very automatic way, so that you're not spending the rest of your life wondering, did my core just do that correctly? Oh gosh, I don't know if I was supported when I lifted up that heavy thing, or when I carried the groceries into the house, or whatever that is. We want a core that is very automatic in the background. The reason that can be so difficult and not feel like you really know what you're doing at first is because of what we talked about. So during pregnancy, if those muscles are getting stretched out and they're getting thin and the brain stops being able to access them as well, then we probably stopped doing that automatic correct core control sometime during pregnancy. And then not all of us are just going to jump right back into it postpartum. Some of us never do, because we have to go back in and purposefully reteach the body how to use the muscles in the right way. And so that, to me, is what core recovery is reteaching the body after a time of those muscles being stretched and thin and the brain not really being able to access them as automatically. The opposite of that is what I see a lot of women doing at the end of their pregnancy and then however long postpartum until we correct it, which is your brain and your system automatically choosing to use your big outer core muscles for stability and for pressure management instead of those nice inner core muscles that some of us don't even know where they are or how to use them because we've never had to think about it before, which is what a pelvic floor physical therapist is there to help teach you. But whenever we talk about core recovery, or the opposite of core recovery, I guess, is continuing to live life, do our activities, do our workouts, solely relying on our big outer six-pack muscle, those big outer obliques, for support and for pressure management, but that was not their job. And now those inner core muscles, that's where true core recovery comes from. And we're not stopping and we're not figuring out how to reuse those muscles again. And so a lot of us might feel like, I feel like my core is pretty recovered. My core feels strong, but it's because what we're feeling is our big outer muscles. And we're never tapping back into those inner core muscles that are so important for core and pelvic floor health, because our pelvic floor co-coordinates with that inner core system. And so if we aren't using the inner core system correctly, we're probably not using our pelvic floor correctly either. Okay, so now let's talk about the steps that I take patients through to achieve that definition of true core recovery postpartum. The first step, always with somebody, is to retrain their breathing pattern. For some people, that's 1 week. For some people, that's a few weeks. It depends on what their breathing pattern was like pre-pregnancy, what it developed into during pregnancy, which for most of us during pregnancy, because that baby ends up in the way of diaphragm, we get that rib flare that we talked about. We get a strange breathing pattern. And at that point, it is what we have to do because we are just compensating and getting breath in any way we can when there's a baby in the way. But then postpartum, some people fall back into that breathing pattern naturally, back into a great 360 diaphragmatic breathing pattern, and some don't. And so sometimes we're spending some time retraining that. The reason that's so important is that it's really hard for your abdominal wall, your ab separation, your muscles to heal and to do their jobs appropriately if we have a mismanagement of pressure, or if that breathing pattern that we're using is pushing a lot of pressure out into the muscles that we're trying to use. So that is always step one. That's always where I start with someone. Day one PT, we're looking at what their breathing pattern is and we're getting them started on stuff at home to work on it, whatever that may look like. Step two is that we are teaching people to reconnect with that inner core unit. So remember, we talked about a lot of people that I see compensate if they haven't recovered their core appropriately. The way I see them compensate is by using their big outer muscles. So we are tapping into that inner core system, teaching them what it feels like to find that inner core system, and then especially use it as a part of a system. So not just using the core, but how do those inner core muscles work with the pelvic floor muscles, and how do they co-coordinate with breathing? So we're connecting that whole coordination pattern together with all of those systems and how they're supposed to be working together appropriately to manage pressure, but also to give you stability. And then step three is the part that most people try to jump to before doing those first two other steps. But step three is actually building in core exercises now that we have the right muscles working, now that we have the right breathing set up, now that we have all of it working together as a system. Now we're building exercises on top of that, and we're progressively overloading the system. We're progressively overloading the muscles. One, so that it becomes automatic again, so that you get back to living life and doing your workouts without having to wonder if your core is doing things appropriately. We know that we overloaded the system in a way that built strength into it so that it's doing it automatically. And two, simply to strengthen strengthen the muscles back, right? So those muscles got stretched and thin, and maybe we stopped using them altogether somewhere along the way postpartum. And so now we're just building in that strength so that they're strong enough to handle things. They're strong enough to handle the workouts that we're doing, handle everything that comes with mom life, carrying toddlers, carrying crazy things, and your toddler, kids, however old they are. I mean, so much happens to a woman's body in motherhood and what they have to handle for mom life. Even if you're not someone who's lifting super heavy weights or hiking really tall mountains or going for runs or anything like that, a lot of times people think, well, if I'm not doing all of those things, what do I really need to strengthen my core for? Just life. We want a strong core so that it can handle everything that we want to do as a mom and everything we want to do as a human, not just a mom, in life, so that our core is supporting it, our pelvic floor is supporting it, our breathing pattern is supporting it. And that is an important thing that I think a lot of people forget. So again, that was a really brief overview of what true core recovery looks like postpartum, why everybody needs it and deserves it, and also just what are the steps that we actually need to take instead of that jumping straight to core exercises that a lot of people think about or think that that's like step one postpartum, what we need to do for our core. It's a pretty brief overview. If you are interested in a very hands-on, laid out for you step-by-step with exercises, with videos, with cueing from me, all of those good things, that is what we are building into the ConqHER Core Foundations program. So that program is going to be over a 12-week period, but it is a do-at-your-own pace program. It's going to be aimed at a few times a week of working on stuff. If that doesn't fit into life right now, it's meant to be done at your own pace, and that's totally okay. But it is the exact progression, the exact exercises, the exact cues, everything that I use to help patients in clinic rehab after postpartum and get their core supporting them again, laid out for you in an app that you can follow along with. So if that's something that you're interested in, that link is in the description so that you can join the wait list. Getting on that wait list just means that you're going to know exactly when that program launches. You will get early access to sign up with a special discount for the program. And even if you just want to learn more information about it first, follow that link because it'll take you to the webpage with a lot more details about it. And you'll also receive some emails that have more details as well. Thanks for watching, y'all. See you next time.